Good day, and you're welcome yet again to another episode of Geomusings with Monso. I'm Monso Ismaila, like you know. We're on the topic of how Iran wasted American military gear. And this time around, we are going to be discussing that topic, particularly with respect to missile interceptors, which we call missile math. What do we mean by missile math? It is simple. Usually, Iran is the one that is firing ballistic missiles into Israel and into the Gulf countries. Like, those are the major belligerents. While American and Israeli military interceptor gear are the ones that are trying to block the Iranian missiles from landing in the territory of Israel and the Gulf countries. Now, this is how it works. When Iran fires a missile, as in a missile into those adversary territories. Usually, it takes much more than one interceptor missile to take an Iranian interceptor, as in an Iranian missile, down. In fact, the culture is that the more the number of interceptor missiles Israel and America are able to fire at the Iranian missiles, the greater the chances of taking that Iranian missile down before it lands, explodes, and does colossal damage. However, there is a problem. The problem lies in the relative cost of the Iranian missile and drone, which are the offensive gear, and the interceptor missiles of Israel and America, which are trying to shoot the offensive gear down. Like I said in a previous episode, the average Iranian missile costs around $500,000. While the popular Shahed drone of Iran, which has done much of the offensive work when it comes to drone activity for Iran, costs as cheap as 20 to 25 to $35,000. However, the American and Israeli interceptor missile is such that one single unit costs $3 to $4 million. Imagine using multiple units of $3 to $4 million to take out $35,000 and $500,000. So the math is not mathing. Now, what Iran now did is that they made things even more difficult. They made things even more expensive. They made things even more hard for the Americans and the Israelis. Why? When the war started, Iran started firing only their oldest missiles. The missiles that they had manufactured in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the early 2000s. In fact, if you see the canisters, if you see the boosters, you will know that this missile is actually ancient of days. So they were firing their oldest and the cheapest missiles first. And because Israel and America were particularly rich in interceptor missiles now, money was a problem, but number was not a problem then. You will see Israel fire as much as 12 interceptor missiles at one Iranian missile, firing 4 million times 12 at 500,000. If the missile lands, it's trouble. If the missile does not land, it has wasted expensive interceptor missiles. That was not just the problem. Another problem was that those interceptors are notoriously difficult to make. For example, Iran manufactures as much as 500 drones every month and manufactures as much as 100 offensive missiles every month. But America is only able to manufacture 6 to 7 interceptor missiles every month, which means that America had a major problem in its supply chain and in its military industrial complex with respect to being able to manufacture interceptor missiles. America manufactures too few interceptor missiles, so few that they cannot just keep up with the rate at which Iran was manufacturing offensive drones and missiles. So money is a problem. Mm? Manufacturing acumen, manufacturing volume, the military industrial process that churns out those missiles, those interceptor missiles, is yet another problem. So America cannot afford to make so much of them. And even if money is not a problem, they can just not make enough of them to shoot down the numbers Iran is churning out and firing. So what happened? Iran used the first generation, the earliest generation drones and missiles to waste as many interceptors as possible of the adversaries. And after they were done wasting as much of them, taking out the radars, don't forget, taking out the third anti-missile systems, don't forget, taking out the Patriot anti-missile system. They now stopped using their old missiles and brought out the new ones. They brought out the Khaybar Sheikans. They brought out the Khurramshahs. They brought out the Qasim Suleimanis. They brought out the Fatahs. They brought out the Gazas. They brought out the Hadid drones. We are talking of the missiles whose warheads were as heavy as 1 ton, 1.5 tons, 2 tons, and they started firing it at the adversaries. And there was little to no interceptors to take them down. The interceptors had been wasted trying to take down the old generation and cheaper missiles successfully and, and unsuccessfully. Manufacturing enough to take down more missiles was a problem, and the cost of manufacturing them was yet another problem. So there was a numbers problem, there was a capacity problem, and there was also a time problem. Now the skies of Israel and the Gulf countries are essentially largely open, and practically whatever Iran throws at them lands most of the time. All they can do now is to censor. Censor in the sense that anybody that takes pictures of the landings, anybody that takes pictures of where destruction happened, they will pick them up, they start throwing them in prison, giving them 5 years imprisonment, asking them to, to be charged for treason and things like that. To make things even worse, it was after Iran had wasted their interceptors that Iran now rolled out the cluster bombs. What are the cluster bombs? A bomb, a missile that is fired into enemy territory. And when the warhead gets into the military, into the enemy territory, instead of descending as a single congruent unit, it splits to 80 pieces. It splits into 80 bomblets. It splits into 80 cluster bomblets. It splits into 50, into 30, into 20 bomblets, making it more difficult, making it more expensive, making it more, impossible to intercept and doing damage over a much larger area, because those bomblets would essentially scatter and go and do damage. As you can see, the missile math was not mathing for America, for Israel, and for its Gulf allies anymore. That is what we call missile math. Thank you for joining us on this episode. Again, don't forget to like, don't forget to share, to follow, to broadcast, to comment, and ask your questions. I would gladly take them. See you in the next episode.